So, okay, we'll move on. We're going to begin our class. This, if we can finish it today, this will be our last class on the molecular relationship. This is called Molecular Politics. And some of you are familiar with it, some of you may not be. Now, the trouble with politics today is the people feel that they are not represented. And this is true all over the world, pretty much. We even in free societies where they can vote somebody in, they vote the guy in, and half the time it's not the guy they want, it's a guy they don't agree with, and he gets in and he does a bunch of stuff they don't agree with. And even when they vote a guy in that they think is on their side and believes the way they do, when he gets in there, then he does a bunch of crazy stuff that they think, well, I voted this guy in and I thought he was going to do A, B, C, and he does X, Y, Z instead. And people get very frustrated. So this is a problem that demands a solution. And if a good solution is presented in a way that reaches the public as a whole, it's possible that it could really go viral. Now, who really demonstrated this was Ross Perot. Ross Perot just give people a taste of feeling that they had some input. Because what Ross Perot, the reason Ross Perot was a third party guy, he came in and when Clinton was running against Bush #1, and he just, it looked like he was going to capture the presidency. And the main thing he did that people really liked is he told people he was going to listen to them. But what was funny about Ross Perot, he would listen to him and then pretty much ignore him and do what he wanted anyway. But at least he said he was listening to him, and he was going to he gave people the impression he was really going to if he become president, he was going to go with the will of the people. And then he mysteriously withdrew, and that just put a damper on everything. And then when he came back in, he didn't have it, he lost his momentum. But if he hadn't withdrew, he probably would have been elected president, because he gave people a taste of what it would feel like to actually be represented. And he was really spoke to an ignored part of the people. We have people that are hardcore Democrats, hardcore Republicans, about a third on each side. And then there's a third in the middle that he kind of really spoke to. And these people that's not extreme one way or another never have anywhere to go. Because when somebody on the hard left or the hard right gets in, they don't feel represented outside of once in a while there's something passed that they like, but they're not really happy with what's going on. So there's a problem, not only in the United States, but worldwide, that demands a solution, and no one is presenting a solution. The solution, as indicated by Ross Perot and others, this is also one of the reasons Trump gained as much traction, as a lot of people felt he was going to represent them. And some people were happy and some people weren't, but still, no one has really carried this off, because what the people really want is more democracy, where they have greater input. And there's a lot of objections to democracy. People don't trust, or politicians have convinced the people that democracy is not the way to go. The politicians do not like democracy because it would take away their power. And as you notice, these politicians will do everything possible. They'll lie, cheat, steal, break the law, do everything possible to maintain their power. Their power is, they're more interested in power than money. They're willing to risk losing all their fortunes if they can retain their power. And power is supreme with these politicians. So giving it up to the people is not in their best interest in their minds. But they have convinced many people that democracy is bad. They say that democracy is like two wolves and one sheep deciding what to do for dinner. And they attribute this to Benjamin Franklin. Well, the trouble is Benjamin Franklin never said that. And they tell us that the founding fathers were against democracy, which isn't really the case at all. There was a division among the founding fathers. Jefferson was the biggest promoter of democracy. He wanted a pure democracy as possible, but it was impossible. Now others, like Alexander Hamilton, he wanted more centralized power because he didn't really trust the people that much. But so you had these arguments among the founding fathers. Jefferson and his camp wanted as much democracy as possible, and others wanted more central authority as much as possible. And what we got was a compromise where we had a representative government where we voted in. It was impossible to have a pure democracy in those times because it would demand more communication than they had. It's possible today with the internet, but it wasn't possible back then. So they decided to elect representatives by a democratic vote. And then these representatives, which in theory would be the best of us, and the best of us would go to Congress and they would make the decisions for us. And this was hopefully would express the will of the people. And what's interesting is Jefferson, a lot of people think even Jefferson was against democracy, but let me just read you a couple quotes from him about what he believed. He said, "Where the law of the majority ceases to be acknowledged, there government ends. The law of the strongest takes place, and life and property are his who can take them." He also said, "The will of the people is the only legitimate foundation of any government, and to protect its free expression should be our first object." He says, "I subscribe to the principle that the will of the majority, honestly expressed, should give law." So what about this idea of the two wolves and the one sheep deciding what to do for dinner? And they also say democracy is just mob rule. Democracy never works, they say. Well, for one thing, the two wolves, the wolves and the sheep are a different species. Right now, we have the human species and the cattle species deciding who to have for dinner, and we decide on the cattle because we're different species. But among the same species, this idea does not make sense, because among the same species, we have this situation. We're either ruled by the majority or the minority. And the more smaller the minority is that rules, the worse it is. And for instance, let's take North Korea, ruled by one guy, Kim Jong-un. A while back, he was displeased with his uncle's opinions. So what he did, he had some starving wild dogs he threw him into a pit with some starving wild dogs, and they ate him alive, and everybody had to watch. So he sent a message to everybody. He says, what I say goes, you don't disagree with me. And so what they do when they have a big rally, they take pictures of everybody and they look through the pictures very carefully. If they see anybody with a frown or doesn't look happy, then they are visited. And so this is a rule by minority, and the smaller the minority, the worse it is. The more you go to the majority, the better it is. And you look at the governments ruled by, the more the people have the say, the more freedom there is. So the fact that the more democracy is bad is an illusion. Well, they say, well, democracy just hasn't worked. Well, democracy has never been employed. Before the United States was created, the biggest, greatest example of democracy was Athens in Greece. And, but what people don't realize is it was far from a pure democracy. In Greece, there was approximately 300,000. In Athens, there's approximately 300,000 people live there. And only the male head, who was a citizen, could vote. And among those that could vote, there was approximately 30,000 adult male citizens entitled to vote. That was 10% of the population. And these people had to vote whether they wanted to or not, the ones that were qualified. And so in Athens, you had 10% of the people, and they had a lot of slaves in Athens also, but among the citizens, they were pretty free. But even with just 10% of the people having input, it was the most successful of that age. Now, nearby Sparta, that was ruled by pretty much a dictatorship. So they didn't have the freedoms that Athens had. But what was interesting about Socrates, and one of the reasons that the government there didn't like him, was he was always talking about how Sparta had a better government, that you needed a government with a philosopher king that could tell everybody what to do. This is one area where I don't agree with Socrates at all. And so he was always talking, and he was teaching about how Sparta had much better government than Athens. And the Athens government didn't like that, and they kept wanting Socrates to leave. But he didn't leave. He thought Sparta was a lot better, but he did not want to move there. It's a lot like people in the United States. They criticize the government of the United States as if it's the worst place in the whole world to live, but they don't want to go anywhere else. They don't want to go live in North Korea or Venezuela or Cuba. They want to stay here, even though they think it's horrible. And Socrates had this attitude. And so they wanted him out, and he didn't want to go, and he wound up committing suicide rather than moving out. And so the Socrates story kind of presents him more of a martyr than he really was. Now, he was a very intelligent man, said a lot of good things, but on this idea of political rule, he was somewhat askew, in my opinion.
Wasn't he forced to drink hemlock?
Oh, he wasn't forced to. He did it on his own free will.
Okay.
They wanted him out. They given him an opportunity to escape. They didn't want to kill him. And because they kept telling him, well, go to Sparta, we'll let you go. And he didn't want to go. He killed himself instead. So he was a stubborn son of a gun. He wanted to stay. If he couldn't stay and teach in Athens the way he wanted, then he decided to kill himself. And but they allowed him, give him avenues to escape. And He's the only martyr in history who killed himself. so in a way, he wasn't really a martyr that everybody makes him out to be. If they really wanted to kill him, they could have done it themselves rather than just letting him kill himself. And so, so it's kind of a interesting story. Once you look into the details, is quite a bit different than a lot of people think about what happened there. Okay, the problem we have today is, first of all, democracy has never been tried. The closest to it right now is Switzerland. Switzerland has a very successful democracy. It's not a pure democracy, but the people have a lot of say-so. Especially the local governments there are very close to a pure democracy, and the national government takes a lot of input from the people in the legislation that's passed. And they have referendums they can submit, and the people as a whole can vote on them. Like they voted on a minimum wage. Somebody come up with the idea, $30, it would be like 30 American dollars for the minimum wage. And people thought that was kind of ridiculous, so they voted that down. So when they come up with really cockeyed ideas, the people show pretty good common sense in Switzerland, and it's been a very stable government and a place where a lot of people want to go to live if they could. So here in America, one of the objections to democracy is they say, well, it'd be unconstitutional. Well, it wouldn't be. There's a way to have a pure democracy here and be in 100% alignment with the Constitution. So what are the problems that we have to be solved that prevent the will of the people from being heard? The way in the United States, it was set up so the founding fathers thought the will of the people would be expressed, because we vote in a representative that the majority seem to think is a good guy that will represent their will. And because the majority votes in these representatives, you would think the will of the majority would be carried out. But instead of the will of the majority being carried out by these people, they are only influenced by the voters at election day. About 60 days before the election, they will start to act like, yeah, I'm in alignment with the will of the people. I'll do exactly what you want. And then after they get in, they pretty much ignore the will of the people. But what does control these guys that get in? Okay. There are 7 different things that control these people once they get in. Number 1 is polls and studies. Okay, they will look at the polls and they will be influenced by what the polls say. And the polls are often askew because what the polls will often do is they'll ask a question so that results can be manipulated that are different than reality. For instance, say there's a bill or legislation pending about education, and there's a bunch of stuff in this education bill that has nothing to do with education. So they'll do a poll saying, well, what do you think about this education? Should we have more of this, more education or whatever? The question is asked in such a way that almost everybody's going to say yes, even though if the public understands this bill, they will say no. So then the people taking the poll are people that want a certain result. And then they get a result from this poll. And then they will publicize it and say, boy, 70% of the people are in favor of this, of education getting better or getting more money or whatever. And then the politicians are influenced by this. Now, they're also influenced by studies like global warming. The only studies that are publicized in the media are studies that support the global warming agenda. But there's many studies that are very askew. Let me just tell you a couple that are not very political. A while back, there was a study about organic foods. So the powers that be doesn't like the fact that organic foods are being more popular because big business makes a lot more money off of non-organic foods. So big business finances study trying to show that organic foods weren't any better. And here's how the study went. The study went this way in the fact that they studied the amount of vitamins available in organic and inorganic foods. And the study concluded there was pretty much the same number of vitamins in organic and regular foods. So they said, so they give this big headline in paper a while back that organic foods aren't any better for you than regular foods. So why you shouldn't even waste your money. But it was a stupid study because nobody buys organic foods for the vitamins. You buy organic foods because they're free of pesticides and poisons. And they also have more minerals. So they didn't involve minerals in the study. But vitamins, yeah, I certainly don't buy organic foods for the vitamins. And so it was a misplaced study. It was a very deceptive statement to make that organic foods were no better and a waste than regular. And now same thing with vitamins. They did a study with vitamins. They wanted to show that vitamin supplements were pretty much a waste of money because a lot of people spend a lot of money on natural supplements. So the vitamin they picked was Centrum, which is the worst vitamin that's out there. It's completely like made of synthetic vitamins. And people into natural foods will never take that vitamin. And so anyway, they used Centrum as the vitamin they did the study on, and the study concluded that it really didn't have any effect. And they did the same thing with vitamin E. But when they did the study with vitamin E, they used a synthetic vitamin E in the study, not a natural vitamin E, which everybody into natural healing always takes the natural one. So the studies revealed what big money wanted them to reveal. And then it's publicized in the media that, taking these things doesn't do any good at all. So the study doesn't really prove anything, but a lot of people that don't pay attention thought it did. And it kept people away from the truth. Now they do the same thing with politics. They use these polls to influence public opinion. And the polls are often made by the people that want the opinion to go a certain way. And so always pay attention to who's doing the poll, who's doing the study, and how the questions were asked. That's the key. Okay, so these wrong studies, bullheaded studies and polls influence our politicians. And when they're influenced by these deceptive polls and studies, they do not represent the will of the people. The second thing is political groups and action committees with agendas, they will throw their support behind politicians and give them money. So then when it comes time to vote on something, then let's say either big oil or big solar, either one gives a certain politician a bunch of money. Then when it comes time to vote, he thinks, well, they give me a bunch of money, so I better vote with them or else they won't give me money for my next election. When he votes the will of the people that gave him the money, is he representing the will of the people? No. It may be completely, his vote may be completely contrary to the people who put him in. The third obstacle that interferes with the will of people is special interest groups. These are lobbyists. These lobbyists will go to Washington, D.C., they'll visit our Congress people and wine and dine them, take them to dinner, and often give them under the table benefits, sometimes money. Every once in a while you hear of a congressman being in, getting in legal troubles because he took some bunch of money under the table. And there's probably a lot more of that happening than a lot of them probably get a lot of benefits and don't get caught. But there's also quite a few legal benefits that they get. But anyway, they get in and they wine and dine these Congress people, often take them on vacations, or maybe they'll pay them to speak at certain events, and that's that they try to also manipulate them and give them benefits in legal ways so they won't get in trouble. And so when it comes time to vote, and he votes in harmony with a lobbyist, does that represent the will of the people? No, the common people really don't have any lobbyists to speak of. And so they do not get represented. Another way the will of the people is frustrated is by trading votes. Let's say one congressman wants some money for his special program that he's putting forward. And maybe it even represents the will of the people in his district. Well, he can't get enough backing behind it. He needs maybe 2 or 3 more votes. And so he goes and approaches some other people in Congress and he says, hey, if you'll vote for me building this new dam project or whatever, I'll vote for your project also. Now, I don't really believe in your project, but I'm willing to trade. You vote for me, my stuff, and I'll vote for your stuff. And so when that congressman then votes, trades his vote, and votes for something he doesn't even believe in or his people don't believe in, just so he can get his own deal passed, is the will of the people being represented? Again, it's not represented at all. Now, a really big thing, a fifth problem, is ignorance of what's in the bill. Do you remember when Obamacare was passed, and just before they voted on, Nancy Pelosi made the famous statement, we have to vote this in before we can find out what's in it. Okay, it was thousands of pages, and there was so much stuff in Obamacare that nobody knew what was in it for sure. And even Nancy Pelosi admitted we won't know what's in it till after we implement it and find out all the details. All they knew is it kind of sounded good on the surface, so they wanted to go ahead with it. And so this is a problem with many of the bills that we have, is our Congress people do not even know what they're voting on. They may know just 1 or 2 ingredients. And oftentimes the bill is 1,000 or more pages, and the congressman voting on it knows 2 or 3 of the pages. And so then once that gets in, oftentimes it has very unpredictable and undesirable results. And we think, and they'll say, well, boy, we didn't realize that was in there. Sorry, everybody. But once it's enacted, then once something gets enacted, it's almost impossible to get rid of it. So it's very important that we know what's in the bills. Then 6 is a really big one, is influence from party leaders. In almost everything that's voted on these days, it's 100% Democrats vote one way, 100% Republicans vote another way. And the reason this happens is because of influence from party leaders. They get a bill up that one side likes, and the party leaders will make sure that everybody in the party goes along with the leadership. If they don't, then they don't get on committees. They don't get financing. They're threatened with denial of a lot of things. In other words, if you don't go along with the party leaders, you probably will not get reelected, and the time you spend in Congress will be pretty much a waste of time because you won't be effective. So you need to go along with the party leaders. So when your guy that you elected goes along with the party leader, is that representing the will of the people? Not usually. The final thing is bias and prejudice. We elect a guy and he acts like, yeah, man, I believe and really supporting the common people and what they want. But because of prejudice, once he gets in there, he has a certain amount of bias that and if it comes down to his bias or what the people want him to vote on, he will often go with his bias. When he votes his bias, he is not representing the will of the people. We have 7 things there that interfere with the will of the people being executed in our government. Molecular politics in one stroke solves all 7 of these problems. And that's the beauty of it. And the way it happens, we don't have to change the Constitution at all, but work within the present Constitution. And the way we do this is eventually will be created what will be called co-legislators. Co-legislators will be legislators, will be common ordinary people that anybody in a district can become a co-legislator. And as a co-legislator, you will be, when a vote comes up for your representative, you will be able to cast a vote as to whether or not you want the bill to be voted on, yes or no. And if the majority of the co-legislators of the congressman's district vote yes, then he has to vote yes. It doesn't matter how many political action committees have donated to him or people have pressured him or what his bias is, he has to vote yes. And why does he have to vote yes? Because a committee will be organized. And the suggested name for this committee is a committee of representation to find political candidates to run that agree with molecular politics. Once they agree, once we find a candidate, the candidate then gives his word to us that he will vote according to the will of the co-legislators. Okay, so he makes that commitment. He has to make that solid commitment for the committee for representation to get behind him. Once he makes a solid commitment, then he runs for office. And can you imagine this person in a debate running, how he would respond? He will say, well, what do you think of the balanced budget, for instance? Are you for it or against it? Well, I'm for the will of the people. What the people tell me to vote on, that's what I'll vote on. Well, what about the subsidies for solar panels? Do you agree with that or not? Well, if the people in my district, if the majority say yes, I will vote for it. If they say no, I won't vote for it. That will be his answer to every debate, every question debate. And can you imagine what the people would think that are listening to that debate? They think, well, do I want to vote for somebody that goes with the will of the people or with the will of a minority? And this person would have tremendous traction. When the first major candidate gets in on this principle of going with the will of the people, it'll eclipse even what Ross Perot did, because Ross Perot only went halfway there. If somebody goes all the way there about following through with the will of the people, it will have a tremendous impact. Now, the way this works is when he gets in, then under his district, people will sign up and they'll sign up using their email address, and they will be given a password. To be able to vote, they have to give their password and their email address, just like with PayPal. It should be very secure. Just like if you want to spend money on PayPal, you have to give your password, and then you get in, and then you can vote your money going whatever direction you want it to go. Well, it'll be a little bit like that. So it should be pretty secure. So this solves every one of these problems. So the person then, it's open to everybody. Anybody can become a co-legislator in the person's district, whether it be a senator or a representative. So if you want to become a co-legislator, then you apply to your either senator or representative, and you fill out a form and get your password, and you are there. And then then what he turns into, rather than a person of power, he becomes a manager. He takes the bills that's available, he publishes them, so the co-legislators can have full access to all the bills before they're voted on. So the co-legislators can read them over and get an idea. Now, he's also, the representative is also an educator. He may have an opinion. He may think a bill is really good. So he will tell his co-legislators, give them his opinion. He says, I think this bill is really good, so I would suggest you guys vote yes on it. But maybe they don't agree with him, so they vote no. If they vote no, then when it comes time to vote, our legislator has to vote the will of the people. If he doesn't vote the will of the people, if he rebels, then there'd be complete withdrawal of support by the committee, and he would have no possibility of getting reelected. So if he wants to get reelected, he has to continue to vote the will of the people. Now, this completely solves all 7 of these problems. First of all, it doesn't matter what the polls or studies shows. Once the co-legislators, if the majority co-legislators vote yes, our guy has to go in and vote yes, okay? It doesn't matter how much money a political action committee has given to the guy. If the co-legislators say he has to vote yes, he has to vote yes. If lobbyists try to influence his opinion, it doesn't matter. If the co-legislators say you must vote yes, he votes yes. If he wants to trade a vote, he can't do it because he has to vote according to the will of the people. Also, ignorance as to what's in the bills will be circumvented a lot because the co-legislators want to see what's in the bill. And so they'll start, thousands of these people will start reading the bills in advance because they want to know what's in them if they're going to vote on them. So they'll start talking about it. And co-legislators will actually force the senator or the representative to look more deeply as to what's in the actual bill. So a lot of the ignorance will be transcended by making this available, what's in the bills, to all the people. And influence from party leaders. If Nancy Pelosi wants somebody to vote a certain way and they're have co-legislators, it doesn't matter what Nancy Pelosi or Republican leaders would say, they have to vote the will of the people. And bias and prejudice, same thing. If the senator has a bias, he wants to vote no because of his bias, but his co-legislators say vote yes, he has to vote yes, even if his bias says something different. So this solves all the problems of our democracy in one master stroke, in giving the people the power. Now, another thing it does is to overcome the ignorances. Many people vote and they don't even know what they're voting on. And all of us have this to some degree. I remember when I vote, especially when it comes to judges, I don't know if the judges are good or bad. And so I don't know what I'm voting on on some of the cases. I do on the president and the representative and the senator always, but some of the others, I'm kind of in the dark on myself. And when this happens to us, if we don't know what we're voting on, we really shouldn't shouldn't be voting. Yet many people are for universal voting. Universal voting would be a disaster because in universal voting, at least half the people wouldn't hardly know anything about anything. And so the best voting system is where people vote because they understand what they're voting on and they know what it's about. And so with the co-legislators, they become involved because they have an interest. Now, a co-legislator may not vote on everything. Let's say you are a co-legislator with your senator, and a bill's coming up and you don't care if one way or another. So you don't even vote on it. Another bill comes up and you think, oh man, I'm really interested in this. So you check it all out. And so you vote as a co-legislator to tell the senator how to vote. And you and the people that are doing this have a vested interest. So your vote is very intelligent, very informed. And an informed vote is much more effective than a vote from ignorance. And with many votes, there's political people, trying to just buy people dinner and stuff like that if they'll go vote the way they ask them to. And all kinds of finagling goes on to get people to vote, and they don't even know what they're voting on. They don't have any idea what's going on. But yeah, if you buy me a dinner, I'll go vote for you, guy, or whatever. And so, if you bust me in there, I'll vote. And so, in a lot of ways, effective government is more effective if we make it a little bit more difficult to vote. If people that vote actually have to make a little bit of an effort, then the vote will be much more effective, because an ignorant vote is like no vote at all in any positive direction. Okay, any comments or questions on that? What do you think? Think it sound like?
I'll be a co-legislator. I'll be one.
Yeah. Well, we need to pick a
I want
candidate.
it.
Need to pick a candidate and get him running in somewhere in the United States. If we got one person in, then it would make the national news, and it would be a pretty big deal. So, well, Tyler, you're interested in this. You want to run for Congress or Senate in Utah down there?
Ella's left.
Oh, he's left. Oh, okay.
I vote for Ed.
Yeah.
Ed's the man.
Yeah.
Got resources.
How about you, Ed? If you were a representative, would you be willing to vote the will of the people, even if you disagreed with them?
Well, I would be willing to vote the will of the people after we discussed it and come to some consensus.
Yeah, right. So that's going to be the hard part for the representative, because sometimes the co-legislators may want him to vote in a way that he doesn't agree with. So he's got to make the agreement that even if he doesn't agree with the will of the people, he will vote the will of the people. And in the will of the people, there is safety. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. It's been presented to the people that the will of the people is dangerous. Well, no, the will of the people is the path of safety. And people will say, well, Hitler was elected in a democracy. Well, when in Hitler's election, he only got a third of the vote. And he wasn't elected. The election was not decided, so the chancellor that was in power at the time gave Hitler the power, not the people. He wasn't voted in by the will of the people. I don't think Hitler would have ever been able to get the majority of the vote. The only way he was able to get in was through subtle means. And then when he got in, he didn't relinquish any power whatsoever. All the power was centered around him, which is what happens in a dictatorship. But the more the power is concentrated, the less the freedom. The more the power is expanded and given to the people, the greater will be the freedom that is available. Because the people as a whole aren't going to vote themselves into slavery, not very often. They have to be extremely corrupted and be manipulated by a powerful media, which the media is certainly doing their best to manipulate us today. But under this system, the people that are co-legislators will have access to the true information. And so it could completely reform the political system in the United States. And if it did here, it would influence the entire world. Okay, any other comments or questions? So you want to run for office, Curtis?
Put me in.
Are you willing to vote?
I'll vote the will of the people. My will is just my own. Just one out of many.
Yeah, most
We'll vote the will of the Borg.
You know, most time the will of the people is fairly common sense. Oftentimes, you look at everything that's happening in our government, a lot of stuff there is happening that people are just grumbling about like the dickens. And the will of the people is not perfect. Now, we're not saying the will of the people is perfect, because the people make mistakes, they get misinformed, but the mistakes they make will never be giant mistakes like an individual with great power. He often, when the big mistakes have been made, it's by individuals, a small group of individuals with great power. And great mistakes are not made by the majority of the people, not normally anyway. It'd be very rare. They do make mistakes. The will of the people is not perfect, but it would be a lot better than what we have now.
Well, right now you have a tremendous amount of fear over gun control and ammunition control in our area. People are buying up ammunition wherever they can. That's why, I have access and I make several $100s a week just selling it, because people are afraid that they're going to lose access to ammunition. So voting the will of the people in this area would mean, yeah, people can retain their guns and buy ammunition and protect themselves and be armed, be an armed citizen. So it would take away a lot of fear, and people wouldn't be out, hoarding and buying out of fear. So
Yeah.
take away, so eliminate fear. That's my point.
Yeah. And on controversial matters, it would probably not go one extreme or the other. So very rarely. So not everybody, no matter what you vote on, not everybody's always going to be happy. But if the will of the people is implemented, then society as a whole will be in a much more peaceful state than when you have two parties at each other's throat all the time. And the great part about this, it doesn't matter if the person runs as a Democrat or Republican. He just has to say, I will vote the will of the people. And he can run in either party. And it doesn't matter which party.
You're back to majority rule, then. That's the basic principle.
Yeah, right. We get back to Jefferson's, let me read Jefferson's quote one more time here. I subscribe to the principle that the will of the majority honestly expressed should give law. That honestly expressed, that's a great statement to have in there, because many people claim, well, this is what the people want, but it's not what is honestly expressed. And if this was impossible to implement back in Jefferson's time, but now because of the internet and instant communication and passwords and everything, it's possible to implement today. We just need one candidate that will run on this principle. And I think it would be pretty easy to get him elected if it were possible to get him into the mainstream. Okay. Any comments or questions before we wrap it up then? Okay, good group today, and we will be off on a new subject next week. So until then, next Sunday at 2 p.m., we will wish you well. I guess it's Father's Day next week too, so keep that in mind.
Happy Father's Day, everyone that's a father.
Yeah, we'll have 2 chickens in every pot, and we'll have 2 cars in every garage when I'm elected.
Yeah, right. Well, just about everybody's got 2 cars these days. That's amazing. Back in 100 years ago, or 70 years ago, that was a dream. Okay, we'll see you guys next week.
Hi, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.